All right. So everybody that's listening, whether it's on YouTube live or it's on YouTube being taped, we greatly appreciate that. If you're listening to us on one of the 20 radio stations, we greatly appreciate that as well. And please like, subscribe, share this video. Again, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Rumble, whatever platform you're listening to us on, please get it out to as many people. We really push getting great guests. And we have a great one today. But we do like when shared, subscribed, and liked on those podcasting platforms. Jose Vega here. If you don't know much about him, you're going to learn a lot about him today. We do hope you go to his Twitter and his Instagram page. It is at JOSBTRIGGA. Again, JOSBTRIGGA on Twitter, on Instagram. It is votevega.nyc for the website. Again, votevega.nyc. And he is a great singer. We'll talk a little bit about that as the interview tips on. But Jose, thanks so much for coming on. Really excited about this. A lot to talk about in the country, not to mention the world today.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for having me on. So what do you want to get into it with?
Yeah, let's kick it around first of all. I got into politics because I was brought up in a union home in Rhode Island, Italian American guy here. I became a Democrat. I feel like we're close to the same age in our 30s. You could correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I'm
But we're
26.
26, 30, close enough. But regardless of that, I always thought that the Democratic Party was the party of the working people. Throughout my life, I voted for Barack Obama twice. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I voted for Joe Biden. And it's getting to the point, and I want you to explain this to the viewers and listeners here, Jose. It's getting to the point where I am fed up with the Democratic Party. They just say a lot of, gobbledygook nonsense. And it's people like you, Jimmy Dore, and plenty of others that have kind of showed the Democratic Party's true colors. Go a little deeper into that because you're not a Democrat and you've had enough of their crap as well.
Yeah, well, I live here in the Bronx in the 15th Congressional District of New York, and this is considered to be the poorest congressional district per capita in the entire United States.
Oh, wow.
And so it's had Democrat rule for the last, I don't know, almost 100 years or so, or well, realistically 60 years. It's been a Democrat stronghold, not just the Bronx, but the majority of New York City has been almost all Democrat. Um, and as far as I'm concerned, it really is all the same, whether it's Republican or Democrat. It really is just one big party. And to see the person who currently occupies the seat here, Richie Torres, care more about a foreign nation, Israel, right? And making sure that they can continue to bomb and kill children and innocent people rather than taking care of his own constituency here in the Bronx or in the United States has been completely disgusting to see. And I think that the Democratic Party has made complete fools of themselves by supporting foreign wars, foreign genocides, foreign overthrows, supporting propping up of people like Zelensky and
Yeah.
of Netanyahu, and they're a joke at this point. And the only difference between them and the Republicans is that the Republicans are much more flagrant and unapologetic about it, whereas the Democrats try to dress it up in a certain way, but it ultimately leads to the same results.
How did you have the balls? And for people that don't know about this, I definitely would have you go back on YouTube, check out and go to his Twitter site as well, because he does have these videos of he went after Paul Krugman. For people that don't know who Paul Krugman, he used to be the Treasury Secretary for Bill Clinton, also a New York Times writer, went after AOC at her own town hall, really took her to task on that. And obviously, as you've spoken about in the last sentence, you did go after and run against as well the APAC tool, Richie Torres. So again, how did you have the balls and the cojones to go up and fight against these people who have a lot of power and could, basically censor you on the internet? They could do many other things. So, I mean, we've seen what the Trump administration has done in the past few months.
Well, I don't think I'm any different than anybody else. I think I'm just like everyone else, a fed up American.
Mhm.
And I think that the thing that to be able to articulate the frustrations of the American people and direct it at the people who kind of need to hear it, I think is something that I would credit to my, being associated with the LaRouche organization and the Schiller Institute since I was about 15, 16 years old. I mean, I'm 26 now, so I've been around them for almost 10, 11 years or so. Um, and the idea that, it's not just rage. You can't just go up and yell at somebody and then, say all nasty things to them because that's one level of expression and it's good. And the people who do that, it's great. That takes one level of courage to even just stand up and open your mouth at somebody that deserves to be shouted down at. But to be able to articulate what is actually the sort of incongruity there or the sort of ridiculousness, I think is something that everybody should be doing more, right? So it's one thing if I went up to AOC and I just said, you're a traitor, you're a this and you're a that. But because I was able to point out the specific things that she was doing, for example, funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine, be calling herself a so-called progressive socialist and yet, not actually adhering to those principles of being anti-war, I think and then pointing that out to her is what makes her kind of is what weakens her up. It's what shows that highlights that incongruity there and highlights the absurdity, and that's what makes it sort of effective. And I would just there's other people who've done it as well. Like my friend Robert Castle did it on Hillary Clinton once, and then that was very good. Just being
Right.
able to go up to that Demogorgon and really give it to her. So I think you just have to show that these people are clowns and that they should not be taken as seriously as they'd like to be.
Jose, I want to talk about this because the Trump administration is spouting a lot of anti-immigrant language, but no one really speaks about this. And I want to get your opinion on this. When we talk about immigration and all these immigrants that have been flooding into our country, especially throughout the Biden administration, it seems like throughout the Trump administration, it's slowed down. But you're seeing the whole thing right in New York City, where there's been many immigrants really pushed in there. A lot of them are on their, they're down on their luck. You can go into that more in depth because you are seeing that firsthand in New York City. But when we hear this, because we don't hear this, I should say, excuse me, this much from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, that when they go in and bomb Ukraine, when they go in and bomb Iraq, Afghanistan, the list goes on and on, Palestine, it puts these countries in an uproar. When we go into Venezuela and try to play around with the elections, it's not just Venezuela, it's many other countries that we played around with their elections in general. And we try to put our stooge in there and they just make a huge uproar. We look at Libya. Libya was a state in Africa that was very, rich and well off. And then we went in, took out Gaddafi. There's slave trading all over Libya. And there's slave trading, not to mention around the world as well, because of the American way. So, and I'm not trying to be anti-American for my right listening listeners here, but I'm telling the truth that we're bringing these migrants to Europe. We're bringing these migrants to America with our interventionism. Do you agree with that? If we were really against immigration, truly, and I don't think people should be against immigration, I think we should have it in a safe and secure way. But if these people that are right and left are really against immigration, they should be fully against the wars because as we keep starting all these wars, we're going to keep bringing these migrants into our country because we tear up their country and they're desperate.
Yeah, hey, you said it better than I could. I think that there's nothing in order to be, you said that you didn't want to upset the people on the right who listen to you, but the truth is that you can be I call myself a patriot of the United States of America. I just don't know where it is right now. And I don't think
Fair.
we've known where it is right now since we put a bullet in Kennedy's brain in 1963.
Yes.
And I think that unless we ever come to terms with what happened there, we will never be the United States of America. And that's why, this release of the files is a good step in the right direction. But I think the sort of sort of problem with people who want to be patriotic and think that they have to be proud of America. You have to, in order to be proud of America and actually be a patriot, it requires you to be critical. I mean, it's in the Declaration of Independence that when governments become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, right? Of course, that every human being is created equal, right?
Yeah.
And that we all have inalienable rights. And obviously, our government right now has become destructive of these principles that we say are, self-evident. And it is the right then of people who call themselves patriots to call out their government's actions and say, no, this is not what it means to be an America First person. This is not what it means to be a patriot. I mean, I've had conversations with people who support my campaign who call themselves, MAGA, and they are
Mm.
not happy with the deportations that are happening. They are not happy with our Israel First agenda. They are not happy with the supporting of Israel and sending them bombs and weapons to kill, lots of innocent people over trying to target, so-called Hamas terrorists. And yet, we're seeing all kinds of war crimes happening over in the region. So, I think it is, if people actually want to be America first, if people want to be supportive of a Trump administration, they have to be more critical. They have to stop letting things slide. They have to so-called stop trusting the plan, and they actually have to get involved in what's going on.
You've seen this throughout your run for political office, for Congress, and also being an activist in general, Jose, that again, Trump won in 2016. They had in 2017, right before the inauguration and after the protests against Trump. And then obviously Biden comes in 2020, and everybody just sits on their fat ass and doesn't do anything. There's no more protests. It's like Biden is Jesus Christ superstar, and let's just let him ride. And then all of a sudden, Trump comes in again, and all these people are keying cars with the Tesla. They're up in an uproar. But the problem is, Jose, is where were they when Joe Biden was president? Joe Biden was not Jesus Christ superstar. He was far from it. He was putting in these same policies that Donald Trump is putting in, except Donald Trump is just going more full throttle on the gas than Joe Biden is. So this is the problem with the country. Donald Trump is the boogeyman. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders is Jesus Christ, and they're going to come in and save you. They're all on the same team as you stated. No one's going to save us. That's like me. I voted for Barack Obama twice. I used to call my congressman in Rhode Island at the time and push them for Obamacare because I was desperate for health care. I was one of the people that didn't have health care. I mean, I'm grateful to Obamacare. I did have to go on Medicaid during the 2020 crisis of COVID. I am grateful that I had Medicaid during that time. I do think Obamacare is a step in the right direction, but it's not the best thing since butter and bread. And then we have Bernie Sanders, and I want to get your opinion on this, who comes in 2015 and looks like he's finally the savior. He's finally the one that we were waiting for. Barack Obama, we were hoodwinked with. Bernie Sanders was the real deal, standing up against the establishment with Hillary Rodham Clinton. And then he just takes it up the behind from Hillary and gives up. The same thing in 2020. He wins Nevada. He looks like he's about to win the nomination against Joe Biden. And then they all coalesce around Joe Biden, leading from Barack Obama to Pete Buttigieg to Amy Klobuchar to the list goes on. And they screw Bernie, and he supports Joe Biden and takes it up the behind again. So again, people like me are like, who the hell are you supposed to vote for anymore, Jose? Because these people say what you want them to say, and then they get in office and they don't do anything. The same with, your friend AOC over there in New York. She was great. I've donated money to her. But then she gets in there. She doesn't get the ruckus. Jimmy Dore talked about this with you and many other people. When she got in there in 2020 for 2021, vote against Nancy Pelosi. She didn't do it. She stood down and she acted like a good little girl. And people like me are fed up. So you know what we do in 2024? I'm not afraid to say it. I voted for Donald Trump because I'm sick and I'm tired of it. I don't agree what he's doing. I think he's an egomaniac. I think he's not a saint for sure. But people like me are sick and tired of it, and we just want to blow up the establishment and start fresh. I'm sorry I went into the rant. I apologize to the people listening, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. Bernie Sanders is, I mean, I was a Bernie bro in 2015, and it is kind of funny that he's doing Fight the Oligarchy tour where he's he bent over backwards for Hillary Clinton, despite the fact that it was revealed that they stole the election from him and they stole the primary from him, and he still went on to endorse her anyway.
He
He's
stole it
take
from Joe Biden too. They stole it from he got stolen from Joe Biden too, and he bent over for Joe Biden. The Build Back Better. It was supposed to have the public option, Jose. Nothing, no public option. Joe Biden said that throughout the campaign he was going to do something on healthcare. People are going bankrupt in New York and all around the country because they don't have healthcare. Here in Florida, they refuse to pass the Medicaid expansion. They're trying to get it on the ballot. It has to hit over 60% to pass. We can't get health care for people that are working. And if you are working, you're going to pay outrageous prices like $300-400 a month, not to mention the car insurance, not to mention the house payment or the apartment rent. I mean, it's crazy. I'm sorry, Jose, but we have to talk about what happened in 2020 as well, just as well as we talk about 2016 with Hillary Clinton.
Well, sure. I don't disagree with anything you said. I think the fact that Bernie Sanders has always been a tool for the Democratic Party, he's there to absorb, and AOC is the next generation of this, to absorb the progressive people of the country who want something real and want a real change, and be able to then put them all in a pen and sheep herd them all back to the Democratic Party so that they can go and vote for the next corporate Democrat who's going to run for president, which might be Cory Booker. Hey, it might be AOC who runs for president too, and I would think I would be as equally shocked. I mean, if AOC had thrown her hat in the ring when the convention was open in 2024 and said, "No, I want to run for president," and I think I would have had more respect for her if she did that. But instead, she decided to endorse Biden for another 4 years, who was completely senile at that point, and then endorse Kamala Harris, who was just a total idiot. I think, you know, yeah, no, I
So
think
is it
it's all an
AOC for
operation.
president or AOC for Senate? What is your opinion? You're on the ground there.
Uh, you know, I mean, I don't really know. I don't really care. Quite frankly, what the Democratic Party does at this point is what they do at this point. I think she's probably going to go for a Senate run. They're going to try to get her to run against Chuck Schumer or something and put her in the Senate. And I think that that's kind of the move that they're playing here. Look, I think people should not buy into this, next generation of Democrats that are coming in. They're running a slate of, like, for example, there's this guy Isaiah Martin who's 26 years old who's running for I think Texas's ninth district or something, and he's this like pro-Ukraine, pro-Israel Democrat. But the thing is, he's young, so therefore people should go and support him. Or like this woman running for Congress named Kat over in Illinois, right? Who, is also 26 years old. And she's like put out this video saying the Democrat Party sucks and we need to grow a spine. So vote for me for Congress, as if she's going to be any different. I think anybody who decides to run under the two-party system right now in this juncture of American history is deciding to go with the losing party and is making moral concessions about it being the party of genocide, about it being the party of just absolute poverty and destruction, whether it's Republican or Democrat. They're both the same thing. And that's why I would never want to run under the two-party system. And I think, but then there's also that problem of like, well, the only way in which you can ever get elected is if you go into the two-party system. I mean, yeah, but no. I mean, I could always become an asshole and then just run into the Democrat Party wing and decide that I want to be, elected, and I would just do a 180 on my morals, and then I would start sucking up and appealing to the quote unquote right people. Or we can completely come in and kick over the chessboard. I'm not saying that we can get independents elected, like for completely overturning the Congress and the government in the next 2 years. But we have to start somewhere, and we started 2 years ago with my campaign, or we started a year ago with my campaign in 2024, and I am running again for 2026. And I think that if we can actually build a machine, an independent machine, one that is led by people who are principled in what they think, as opposed to certain beliefs, because there's people that I vehemently disagree with when it comes to economics, like Angela McArdle, but I would trust in government because I know what motivates them, which is just the future of the country, not who's in their pockets. And I think if we create a movement that's not built on populist ideas, but one that's built on principle, one that's built on what is going to make the future of our country better, one that doesn't, just benefit us, as congressmen or elected leaders, but one that benefits everyone and will benefit somebody born 50 years from now and 100 years from now. That kind of government is one that I'm building, and I'm looking for people to help me build it.
Yeah. Well, we're grateful that you are doing that. Again, people can follow Jose at JOSBTRIGGA, Twitter, Instagram. It is votvega.nyc. Again, votvega.nyc is his website. Jose, as we continue on into the conversation, I want you to go a little deeper into what is going on in NYC now. Obviously, Cuomo running for mayor. We have Eric Adams in his trouble, but he is running as an independent now. That race seems to be Cuomo's to lose. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Not to mention the crime and the homelessness and the expensiveness of living in the city in general. What is going on there? Is it as bad as it seemed and the media is playing it up to be, or is it worse than the media is saying? What do you think?
Well, I mean, New York City is horrible, not for the reasons that the media says it is. I mean, is it like super crime ridden? It's not that bad. I mean, but it's dirty and disgusting, and the infrastructure is terrible, and people are living in the worst the levels of despair of wealth inequality we've ever seen. I mean, the median rent in Manhattan just went up to something like $2,900 a month for a one
Wow.
bedroom or something like that, something completely stupid and absurd like that, which, is quite frankly shocking. And so, I think that, what's needed, is not just one person who's going to come in and save everything. I mean, I like Zoran. I got no reason not to trust him so far. I mean, other than the fact that like some of his DSA volunteers have been pretty nasty to me. But, I think that what we need a complete overhaul revolution, one that just doesn't start in one community or another, but one that decides to take it as a nationwide. Because that's the only way in which you're ever going to really fix the United States in every single part of, you know, for example, like Detroit is just as run down as the Bronx. There's Mississippi, the whole state is the poorest state in the entire country. There's parts of Oakland that look horrible. There's all kinds of neighborhoods around the country that need the same kind of attention the Bronx does. So on the one hand, yeah, I'm running for Congress in the Bronx, and I will turn the Bronx into a more sophisticated advanced science center if elected. But you're only going to be able to do that from a national standpoint, from a national approach to a national vision to make sure that there isn't a place on this country that has poverty in it. And so, New York City and other places like it are just symptoms of this global financier oligarchy that is controlling the United States and its policies.
Well, what we haven't really fully got into deep is the money that is going in the military industrial complex. There is the defense budget. There is also the Black Ops budget, which no one speaks about. The defense budget doesn't get audited. The Black Ops budget is never getting audited. So even if you get to Congress, if you even bring those budgets up, it's like no go. They'll try to do some crazy stuff. So that's a problem there. And then, you talk about all these cities around the country that are so run down, Jose, even here in Florida, in Orlando, right? I live about 8 miles from Disney. When you're over there, it used to be there would be nobody panhandling. Now, every day, there's different people panhandling in areas where there was never in panhandling. In Rhode Island, where I'm from, besides Providence, there was never any panhandling. Now, when you go outside into the suburbs, which are mostly white, we'll be realistic and honest about that and truthful. There's panhandling all over the place now in Rhode Island, in rich white suburbs. So that's when you know, hey, I never saw this when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Now I'm seeing this in different spots around the country in very well off areas, suburban areas. Something is going on in the country, and it's because, as we just stated, the defense budget is getting all this money. Donald Trump said no cutting the defense budget. The Democrats agree. More money to Israel, more money to Ukraine, more money to fighting now a war probably against Iran. So now we have to worry about all this, and no one really gives a damn. And again, I feel sorry because we have the blue cult and we have the red cult. The red cult is the Donald Trump MAGA cult where they wear the red hat. They think Donald Trump is Jesus Christ. They're buying the Donald Trump Bibles. And then you have the blue cult where they think Donald Trump is racist, sexist, anti-Semitic. Barack Obama is the best president ever in the history of the world. I mean, it's two different cults. And then also we have the powers that be, and this is where I want to get your opinion. The powers that be, the people that are rich in our country, are playing people like you and I against off each other because we believe different things. They're playing people off to, I should say, they're brainwashing people, Jose, to watch all this silly stuff. It's like football now, Democrats versus Republicans. The Democrats are the Patriots, the Republicans are the Eagles. Everything is like a game. It's not about what's going on in real life. And just to kind of put the exclamation point, we saw this in the 60s when Martin Luther King Jr. was bringing people together. Forget about the March on Washington. Let's talk about how he was bringing the unions together, the blacks and the whites and the Hispanics together to fight for unions, to fight for equal pay for equal work. And then they murdered him. So again, it's all about pitting people against each other for race, for sex, for everything in the kitchen sink because they don't want us to come together because they're afraid of us.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you completely. And I think that it's not necessarily even just the State Department budget or the fact that now we're going to have $1 trillion Pentagon budget. But here in the Bronx, for example, there are proposals for casinos to open up, and they've closed down 18 schools in the Bronx, and
Yeah.
they're trying to close down two more right now. One of them looks like may still be open, the other one not so much. And you know, at a certain point, look, we can look at our leaders. We can look at the people who represent us and our elected officials and say, "Gosh, you guys are idiots." But it's like we have a constitutional republic. Ultimately, the responsibility lies on us. And as much as I hate saying it, people get the government they deserve.
Right.
And I think that that is something that everyone who's listening to this should reflect that. You can say, yeah, this person sucks, that person sucks. You can say that, our God, our presidency is horrible or our elected officials are horrible, but who's the one electing them? Why aren't we fighting for someone better? Why aren't more people running for office as independents saying, I'm not going to take this anymore?
Well, again, it's this cult worship, as we just stated. I got to vote for the Democrat because my family's been a Democrat for so many years. I was raised a Democrat. The Democrats are for the working people, the Republicans for the rich. They're both for the rich. Let's be real. I thought somebody like you would have a chance in 2026, especially after what Donald Trump did in 2024, where he really, he lost New York. He lost in, Rhode Island and Massachusetts and all these northeastern states, but he drove the numbers up a little bit. And it made me think like somebody like you could get some of those people, that 2 or 3 or 4% that were really saying, you know what, we don't like Donald Trump, but like somebody like me, we want to stick it to the establishment. We've had enough of all this money going to Ukraine, all this gobbledygook nonsense talk about social issues this, social issues that. And it seems like, and I would like to get your opinion of what's going on in the streets. It seems like no one really cares about changing the elected officials, that they're just going to continue voting for their representative, whether it's Richie Torres, whether it's AOC, whether it's whoever the heck else we put up there, because they're a Democrat, and it's the X against Donald Trump. Do you feel like there is a chance that maybe somebody like you could get that 3, 4, 5% that voted for Trump that are really Democrats in New York or even around the country?
Well, we got 2.5% last time we ran in 2024,
Right,
but this time I'm going for 51%.
right.
And I think that, we're out in the streets as much as we can be. Um, the problem is, we're stretched thin. We need
Yeah,
volunteers, of course, and we operate on a $4,000 a week budget. So we need we need people to come in, help us supplement our forces. I mean, one thing is that we have a year and a half leeway time before the midterms. We have November of 2026 till the next federal election cycle. And that's why I'm making sure that I'm declaring war with the Democratic Party and Republican Party right now. Because Donald Trump, I think, got 30% of votes in the Bronx, which was kind of a surprise and a shock for people. They were like, "What?" And I mean, it's not hard for me to understand. I get it.
sure.
People are fed up with the Democratic Party and they think that Trump is the way out. So, frankly, and also, I mean, they did try to jail the guy. They did try to run like, something like 150 felonies on him or something, and they tried to impose all these penalties to prevent him from being the president. And he surpassed it all. And, people look at that a certain way. You look at world leaders like Lula. Lula was jailed by his
Yep.
political opponents. Presidents around the country, around the world have been shot at, jailed, tortured, right? So you think about it, like Trump is now falling in line with that sort of tradition of other leaders around the world that have gone through these same things. Again, this is not an endorsement of the guy. I'm just simply saying how people viewed it here. And thus that's why they had the increase of the um that's why they've had the sort of increase of the support. But I think now, given that we have this platform, I mean, what we have now that we didn't have before is we have an office, we have a headquarters, we have a staff here, and we also have real ideas. We'll be able to educate people on what real American system of economics is. It's not capitalism, it's not socialism. There was a form of economics that built this country that allowed us to have the roads and the infrastructure, the canals, the bridges, the airports that we have now was all because of Alexander Hamilton. And our campaign has the ability to educate people on this now and be able to be elected on the basis that we can educate the population, not to just be against something, but to be for reconstruction, but to be for redevelopment, but to be for further development, not just rebuilding our roads, because all of our roads here in New York are terrible, but building stuff like high-speed rail. That's something that should be a part of American system of economics, and it is part of the American system of economics, but only if we get to do that, to actually get elected, and but not even to be elected, just to get people calling for this. Because if we can get people here in the Bronx, in the poorest congressional district in the country, calling for stuff like high-speed rail, for reopening schools that have been closed down, we will have a major shock in the entire country.
Again, at JOSBTRIGGA, it is votevega.nyc. Last few questions, Jose. I want to talk about an issue that I've heard a lot about in New York City is the subways, whether they run on time, also the fares. We also speak about what's going on with the crime in that. I know you would be more as far as federal, being in Congress, and that's probably more of a city state kind of deal. If you get elected to Congress, what would you do to help the subways, become, not, like I said, safe, affordable, and clean?
Part of the problem now, I think, is that 75% of the profits that the MTA has goes back to something like repaying loans or something. And this was because of the Big Mac, the Municipal Authority Corporation that came in the 70s in New York City and completely restructured all of our debt and our finances, so that now we are owned basically by a banker dictatorship here in New York. And I think the problem with the subway is that, one, there aren't enough lines. For example, here in the Bronx, we don't have a cross Bronx train system. We only have north-south trains. We don't have east-west trains. We need east-west trains that go across, the cross Bronx, across 95, that go across Fordham Road. But we also need an interborough train system that goes from the Bronx to Queens to Brooklyn. We don't have that. Anybody who wants to go from the Bronx to Queens through public transportation either has to take one bus line, which is really slow, or they have to take the train into Manhattan and then into Queens, or vice versa, from the Bronx down to Manhattan, down to Brooklyn. There's no way in which you can go around. And so I think expanding the train lines that are available would be useful. In terms of keeping them safe, you have a big homeless crisis here. I mean, we've shut down over 200 since I think 1950. We've shut down over 200 facilities that were used to house the mentally ill, people who were
Yes.
down on their luck, and I think one is just rebuilding those and reopening them and then repurposing them so that people can, go back and get the mental health treatments that they need and get the counseling that they need. And then the other thing is you have to make sure people are productively employed, not just like a gig economy, which is a horrible indicator of how well the economy is. Just because somebody is doing Uber 13 hours a day and then goes to sleep for 8 and only has like 2 or 3 hours to themselves does not mean that that person is, productively employed. That's just gig economy stuff that doesn't really contribute to anything productive. I'm talking about rebuilding a whole generation of engineers, carpenters, welders, physical things, surveyors, people, things that are needed in order to actually rebuild New York City. So then the other thing is that the subway system, I think, uses like 100-year-old technology that is so outdated that there are certain train carts that if they were to break, they couldn't replace the parts because they don't manufacture the parts anymore. So, I think we're gonna have to think about advancing our how our train systems even function, how the signal lines even work, and also inventing new, or not inventing, but adopting new safe measures. For example, there are parts of Europe and in Japan where the plastic, not plastic, but like they have sliding doors that are always closed until the train comes, and then they open up when the train doors open too. I think a lot of people are afraid of getting pushed into the subway with, I can understand why. I mean, the New York Post, like once every week, has something about someone getting pushed in the train system. But these are common sense things that can be done that if you had a government that actually cared about people, that this wouldn't even be something of discussion. It would just be like, yeah, let's just do this. Like, wouldn't even be talked about. It would be like so low on the priority scale. It's like not on the priority scale, but so low on like, the things that people would be discussing that I think that if you had a government that actually cared for people, it would be like, what do you mean this hasn't been fixed yet? What are you doing? Just go fix it. Let's like stop everything we're doing and go fix this right now. That's what I envision a real government would do.
But the issue is again that you're only one vote in Congress. It's not like the Senate where you can kind of hold up any kind of ballot measure. And it's very hard to get these things passed, especially if you're running against the establishment. Because as you know, what happened in 2024 is probably going to happen to you in 2026. Running for office, getting the money, from regular working people is hard. You know that as well as I do. Getting money to get on the ballot and how hard they make it for you to get on the ballot is extremely hard. You can go in depth in that in just a second. And even getting the media attention. I know more people are gearing towards watching stuff on YouTube and podcasts, but it is tough to get that media attention more so than somebody that's extremely well funded like Richie Torres is because he's getting all that money from APAC and other special interest dollars that he's getting. So, how do you get past all this?
Well, I think for one, people have to make a decision if they want the same kind of government schlop that they're already getting, then they don't have to support me.
But do you
But
feel like people have given up on the system in general? When people you meet, they just say, you know what? All these politicians are just a bunch of crooks. They're a bunch of clowns. We voted for some of these people. They come in, like AOC, they, do the fairy tale and all the pixie dust, and then it just evaporates away and they go with the establishment. And people have just kind of given up and they're just going to work their jobs and just say, you know what? Screw Washington, screw Albany, whatever happens, happens, and we're just going to try our best. I feel like more people are talking that way than people like me that used to believe that Barack Obama was Jesus Christ, Bernie Sanders was the Great White Hope, and the list goes on and on. And now I've just kind of given up and said, you know what? What will be, will be.
Well, a lot of people do feel that way.
Right?
And if you adopt that measure, then you don't have a right to complain about what comes next. I mean, it's
Fair.
like being on the Titanic and it's sinking and you're just going to complain about all this water that's seeping in and it's getting colder. I think that people need to fight back. Like seriously, we can't just adopt a counterculture approach where we're just deciding we're going to go do our own thing because there is no such thing as your own thing. You have no your own thing now. Everybody is dominated by what is actually happening in the government right now. Whether it's bombing people in Palestine or whether it's the poverty here, it's all one policy. And if we're just going to resign and give up and say all the politicians are crooked and everything sucks and I'm just going to go and live my life and pretend like none of this is happening. I'm going to go on, Tinder or something. I'm going to find a wife and then I'm going to have a kid and then hopefully that kid will do something better than me. That is weakness. That is, just like wimpy behavior. Nobody should be taking up that ideology or that mentality right now, because if we allow it to happen, then that is complicity. And complicity is choosing the side of the people who are carrying out these horrible acts. That's why I'm running for Congress. And you think about it, right? Richie Torres, everybody knew what an asshole he was in 2023, 2024. The Democrats were complaining about him. The progressives in the Congress and the Democrats hated Richie Torres. Nobody primaried him. Nobody in the
Well,
Democratic
nobody
primary.
put their money behind you. Nobody with AOC, Ilhan Omar, that whole group that runs around with the little pamphlets and they're talking at Trump's State of the Union. They didn't help you. They don't give a shit about you. And
I don't
that's
need,
the
but
problem.
that's the thing. Like, that's not that's a me problem. If for some
True.
reason people aren't supporting me enough, I must be doing something wrong. That's honestly, look, I'm not going to go and blame other people
No,
because
but
they're
you're
not
not doing
supporting me.
something wrong. I'm not trying to stick up for you, but we're going to tell the truth here on the program. They're not funding you because they're getting told by Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries, do not put any money behind this guy. Do not help this guy by doing rallies because we don't want him in here. We don't want his style of politics. You got to do the same as the other people. They don't want you in there because you're going to disrupt the system. All those other people are saying they're disrupting the system. AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Bernie Sanders. They're just spewing a lot of gobbledygook nonsense. You actually want to put stuff into action. They don't want people like you. They want the people that talk the talk. They don't want the people that walk the walk.
Well, I'm willing to believe that there's enough people in this country that would get behind me, support me, and
I was
help
more
me in
saying
20.
politicians, but go ahead.
Well, but see, like, that's the point. I mean, I don't care about AOC's endorsement. I don't care about the Democratic Party endorsement. I don't care about Elizabeth Warren, Ilhan Omar, because these people are frauds and they've taken moral
Right.
concessions, so I don't care about them. They don't actually believe a solution is possible. They just think if we get enough Democrats elected, then we can do whatever we want and we can get our progressive agenda going. But it's
You're
like we've
right.
seen this happen where the Democrats have controlled the executive, the Senate, and the Congress, and they don't get anything done. And so in terms of people, I think what we need here in our campaign, and I'm putting this challenge out to everyone, it's like if you want to see a viable independent candidate actually put up a real fight, we need $100,000 in our war chest. That's just what's going to allow us to operate logistically for a year. That's just until June of 2026. That's just so that we don't have to worry about the basics, so that we can actually put up a decent fight. And if people are willing to put up the money to help us do that, or the manpower and the time to do that, then we can show that we can actually have a viable alternative where people don't have to resign and think that government is just full of crooks. And the legal limit for anybody to donate is $3,500. So if people actually want to see a real difference and a real change in this country, they should consider contributing to my campaign.
We just have an audience question and then we'll call it quits for today. And Jose, I do thank you for your time. I did interview Diane Sear last year, I believe it was, yeah, for her Senate run. I know you guys are very close and She is very in the LaRouche movement as well. Can you tell the viewers in the audience listening in general what the LaRouche movement is? Because we just got a question about that.
The LaRouche movement or the LaRouche organization was something that was founded by Lyndon LaRouche back in the early 1970s. And it was founded on a principle that nations can coexist through mutual development and um, mutual joint scientific endeavors. So, for example, emulating what Kennedy had proposed at the United Nations in September of 1963, where he made a proposal to the Soviet Union that we can jointly go to the moon together. This would
Hmm.
mean that both countries would have to work together and our people would have to work together to come up with new scientific principles to get people on the moon. And now we can apply that today. I mean, we see, of what, Lyndon and Helga Zepp-LaRouche have conceptualized, in places like China and Russia, Brazil, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus 23, or China's Belt and Road Initiative, where what they're saying is we're going to collaborate with nations on joint development projects that benefit all of us, win-win cooperation. And so it was that and getting to that through nonviolent, direct, creative action. His organization worked with people like Bernard Lafayette, people like Sylvia Olden Lee, Amelia Boynton Robinson, especially in the 80s and 90s. Some of these legendary civil rights figures that, were collaborating and working with our movement in the 80s and 90s to show that there is a beautiful way forward to collaborate with people by appealing to the better angels of their nature. In other words, we're not bloodthirsty human beings that all want to kill each other. And that's why we need to have a person with the biggest stick in the room, but rather that you can have mutual cooperation through beautiful ideas because people are able to resonate with things that move them. People are able to resonate with people that are going to want to build a better future for, their people or their, for generations down to come. So that in a nutshell is the LaRouche organization.
Are you worried that due to Donald Trump, due to the poverty in our country, that again, people are pitted against each other due to many different things, racism, sexism, the list goes on, that, the powers of the LaRouche movement that you just spoke about, people think that that's a joke because people just want to fight people now because, again, they have nothing to lose now because of, the country is going to hell.
Well, people are going to have to change how they think if they want to actually survive and they want their country to survive. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. It's truly bad. Leave the audience with a little bit of hope as we end the conversation. There's been a lot of doom and gloom. I apologize to people listening. We do tell the truth of what the hell is going on in the country. And I do thank Jose for being very honest. I hope people go to votevega.nyc. Again, it's JOSBTRIGGA on Twitter and Instagram. Leave us with some hope, Jose.
We're approaching the 250th anniversary of our country, of the founding of our country. And I think a lot of people are going to have to make a decision as to whether or not they want that to mean something. And I think that our campaign is a perfect embodiment of reigniting that spirit of 1776. Everything that was written about in the Declaration of Independence as to why we revolted against the British is exactly true of our government today. And because of the tradition we have and the history we have, we can reignite those principles again. We can reignite that spirit of independence again, but only if people decide to break from their chains of the two-party system, break from their chains of being resigned to thinking that it's all just doom and gloom, and deciding to fight one more time. This is the year to do it. And if people want to support me in that, they can go to votevega.nyc. The legal limit for an individual to contribute is $3,500. We operate on a $4,000 a week budget, so we could really use it, and that'd be very helpful for us.
Jose, people need to vote for you. And I'm not just saying that as, just because you came on the program. I'm saying it's because of the truth, because we do need to change this country for the better. We need to make sure that we put people in there that are like us, that are regular working people, that are fighting for the issues that we care about, housing, economic issues, also issues to make sure that we get good affordable health care, hopefully universal health care. That would be the objective. It's funny that Israel keeps getting all this money, but they have universal health care and we don't in this country. So this is the problems we're facing as Americans. We do need to audit that military budget as well. Those are some of the big problems. And again, the only way they're going to get solved is if you put in regular working people like Jose Vega. We do hope you look at his campaign, go to his website, go to the Instagram, go to the Twitter, and also follow him in general. It's going to be a long fight for the next year and a half. And we're grateful we have someone like Jose to be in that fight for, again, the regular working people, not just of New York, but also the country, because if he gets in there, he's not just going to be representing New York. He's going to be a vote for us around the country, people that actually want change. Again, Jose, can you just read off to the viewers and the listeners where they can go and follow you, find you, donate money? The list goes on and on.
Well, votevega.nyc is our website. It's where you can donate and volunteer. And my social media is, as you said, JOSBTRIGGA, or you could just put Jose Vega into Instagram and or X, and I come up.
Jose, thanks so much. Keep up the great fight. We're so grateful you came on. Hope to have you on again sometime soon. And again, for the listeners and for Jose, I'm sorry if I got a little long-winded. I felt like fighting a little fight, even though I was fighting against myself and not Jose. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Jose, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're good.
All
Did I
right.
start?
Thanks.